Where are the guides and the counselors who can put us in touch with our higher nature? Maybe we can learn to do that for each other. This is my 7th video in Stories That Re-enchant. And Abraham Maslow is a pretty well-known psychologist who came up with the hierarchy of needs, although not the pyramid shape, which some marketing psychologists came up with afterwards. But he addressed the issue of higher needs, but in kind of a problematic way. And I'm not a fan of the hierarchy of needs for a couple of reasons. One is that the lower levels of it just seem like common sense. Every psychologist, psychotherapist, social worker is taught that people need to eat and have safety and shelter before they do anything else. So the other part of it is Maslow thought, and he was probably judging from the example of his own life, because he grew up in relative poverty and had a really hard time in an unsafe place before becoming a psychologist and a teacher. So he thought that when you satisfy the lower needs, the higher ones come online. He called that the prepotency of needs. The research doesn't seem to bear that out, and neither does actual accounts of people's lives. So there are plenty of examples, for instance, of starving artists who don't have basic needs met but continue to be creative. There are, at the other end of things, examples of people who get their basic needs met. Maslow called them deficiency needs because the urge goes away when they're met temporarily. You eat and you're good until you get hungry again. So lots of examples of people who get all their basic needs met and aren't particularly creative, aren't really helpful for their society, don't really contribute anything. And Maslow admitted that toward the end of his career. But what he did get onto, which I think is very powerful, is this whole idea of higher human nature and higher needs. The need for wonder, the need for beauty, the need for meaning and a sense of purpose in life, the need for fulfillment. What we might call spiritual needs, which he meant non-theologically. So why not encourage us to get in touch with those parts of ourselves? I mentioned in my last video the idea of lamplighting, which does that. I'll say more about it going forward. It's part of what I do in life, is teach people how to do this. But I wanted to give you a story example where a little bit of lamplighting might have come in handy. So there's a wonderful short story by Jorge Luis Borges called The Aleph. And the Aleph is this magical point where you can see anything if you look into it. It's like this little point in space and time where if you're lucky enough to get a glimpse into it, you see everything. All the wonders, all the beauties, everything. So the narrator of the story gets to glance into the Aleph and he describes what he sees. And part of the point that Borges makes with this story is that things like ultimate beauty, meaning the sacred, are treated rather shabbily in our cultures. And so in the case of the Aleph, it's actually owned, imagine owning such a thing, by a guy who keeps it in his basement so he can win competitions with it. He looks through it to get an edge on his competitors. And by the end of the story, the narrator is so taken over by customary ways of thinking and customary habits that he begins to doubt whether he saw what he saw and whether the Aleph even exists. So I've imagined, maybe I'll do this someday, writing a sequel to the story where somebody reminds the narrator of that transcendent experience and says, you looked for one brief instant through the sacred eye of wonder. Don't you remember?